Would be the front of your
There he is. Man of the hour.
You know, we actually talked about sound.
Excellent. Since we heard the door, we pause for 30 seconds. That way you can maybe bring it in outside. All right, welcome to everyone. Call the October 7th City of Mount Vernon Council meeting to order. Not aware of any changes to the agenda that we have in front of us. I'll entertain a motion.
There's one. Consent agenda number 6, Charles Halsey. That's one of those boards that you just always kind of read out, but it's not here.
I thought that was.
Now that you say it, that makes perfect sense, yeah.
So it's a board that hasn't met in my 4 years that I've been here.
Because I thought he moved north, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's up in
So there's that change.
Okay. So with that
Other
said,
than that change in the agenda, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item is communications. Is there anybody that would like to address the council? If so, please do it now. Seeing no one, we will move on to the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance. Ron and Jamie are both here to talk to the council. Just a quick little history. Ron and I had a meeting back in end of August, I think it was August 28th. It was just an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance. I thought it'd be a great opportunity for Ron and his team to share what they do with everybody up here. I think it'd be a great opportunity for us to partner with this team. So with that said, I'll let Ron and Jamie speak to the Metro Economic Alliance.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for giving us a few minutes to make a short presentation and maybe open up for any questions that you have. With permission, Mayor, can Jamie come forward and pass out one of
Yes,
our
please.
reports? What Jamie has is our capital investment report, and this just shows some of the projects over the last 3 years that have been announced in our area. And over 143 projects totaling $1.79 billion. So this is all not just capital investment in property, but in many cases, many of these companies have created tens and hundreds of jobs, which I'm sure people here in Mount Vernon obviously do drive in to Cedar Rapids and Marion in the metro area to work. And we wanted to just point this out because this is one of our prime directives, is economic development. And it really takes two positions. One is recruiting companies to the area. And the second is helping existing business and industry grow. We continue to try and bring companies to the region. It's a little more challenging because of our tight workforce supply. Many of the existing companies struggle to hire employees. And so a company looking to move here, they question whether they can, find the employees to work. And I'll share with you what we do in a second. Jamie's going to handle that. But really a predominant share of our work is on existing business and industry. So if you think of it in a sports terminology, a football coach will tell their players, we got to protect our house. Let's win the home games, and then if we can have a split on the road, we'll have a winning season. And that's what we're trying to do, protect our house so more of the businesses here in the area are already expanding. And so you know how commerce works, and not everybody lives in a particular community that business located in, and that's what we see that why our corridor area has really been thriving. As a matter of fact, one of the companies here in Mount Vernon Construction, is doing work on the Cedar Rapids flood wall. So when you drive on 380 over the 380 bridge, Quaker North, all the tuck pointing is being done by Mount Vernon Construction. So that's an example of the ripple effect of the overall economy. So one of our challenges really is to workforce, is to bring people to the area. So a couple years ago, we formed an organization called ICR Iowa, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, and that's the corridor area. So it represents the north end of the corridor, which is Lynn County, Jones County, Benton County, and Iowa County, and then the south end of the corridor, which represents Cedar County, Johnson County, and Washington County. So I'll have Jamie share a little bit about that, and I'll pass out some information about ICR Iowa.
Okay, so as Ron mentioned, thank you for inviting us too, from my behalf. ICR represents the region, and we hear on a daily basis, workforce, workforce, workforce. So while jobs has always been something that economic developers are going after, now it's critical for the success of all of our businesses. So that group primarily focuses on talent attraction, but they're also working on a lot of pipelines. So we have efforts around immigration, getting immigrants and refugees into the pipeline, ex-offenders, getting them into the pipeline, all of the Kirkwood community colleges and surrounding colleges, Workforce Learning Center out in Iowa County where I work, getting them into the mix with the skill sets that are needed to bring people into the workforce. Their primary target is that talent attraction, getting people to come back to the area. And even though it's ICR with the big municipalities, the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, one of the big attractions to our area is just the quality of life that you can find in the smaller towns, and then have that commuting distance back and forth. I personally have commuted this way a lot of times with my daughter to go to Silver Spider and all your events that you have up here. So there's a lot of going back and forth. And I'm really curious about the new residential area that you have coming up. Everybody's excited about that. So that's what they do. They're trying to get boomerangs back. They have a website where they go out and they say, hey, you know, if you're in that middle range, you got kids, you want to come back to the area because you have family, please let us know. I don't remember how many resumes they're up to now, but that's direct resumes that can go to our employers here. There is a line in the sand there as far as a monetary contribution of $1,000 for those companies to get those emails directly to them. But they're working on that. They have a program called Wingman that will pair you up with someone once you're in the area who has similar interests. So it's retention, but also attraction. So I get paired up with people who speak Spanish and coming out from different companies or countries. So a really interesting ambassador type program, and that's free. That's for anybody in the region. And then they're also out at the football games and the away games, trying to recruit alumni, trying to get the messages out. There's a huge marketing campaign. If you have a chance to go look at the website, it's phenomenal. ICR Iowa. They have a kind of a quirky, here it's real type slogan that they use. So they'll say football games in the snow, or your 10-minute commute is real. So they play in a lot of things that are very authentic about Iowa. We're not putting something out there that we're not. As a matter of fact, we're kind of having fun with it. So that's what we would love to have you in with us as far as collaborative partners in that space, and trying to bring more people to this area, and then also to help us with the pipelines that we're creating.
So as we're trying to move people back to the area, obviously there's online stuff, but we also have some printed material that we're putting together now in partnership with our larger employers that are trying to recruit people here. Rockwell would be an example. I'll just have, this isn't our piece, but you can look through the community section if you would. This is something that Greater Peoria did. And what it did is it had a community profile. After you have some of the general information, they have a community profile in there for all the communities in the Peoria area. So we're modeling our marketing piece after their marketing piece. So you get a flavor of it as you pass that down. You'll see we'd like to feature Mount Vernon in the publication, and we'd also like to feature Mount Vernon on our website. And that's what we'd like to discuss with you about the possibility of adding to. So you're more than just a dot on the map. you're actually a featured community. So as we've been growing ICR Iowa and increasing our marketing of that, we wanted to include all the communities. So ICAD, which is the Iowa City Area Development, they've been reaching out to Tipton and Tiffin and Solon, and we're reaching out to Mount Vernon, Ely, and Center Point. We'll be up in Center Point visiting with the mayor and council tomorrow, and then next week we'll be at Ely and also Fairfax. So we wanted to share this opportunity for Mount Vernon to be part of the effort, and if it's something that you'd like to do, and get a narrative from the city administrator or the mayor and get that available for our publication that we'd like to get done this quarter.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, obviously, with the bypass, 2 new housing developments that are going on. I think it's something that is at least worth time and consideration from, obviously, everybody up here that has the power to make that choice. Chris and I talked about it as well a few months ago, and I think, Chris, I don't know if there's anything that you want to share from your experience and your kind of thought as well.
We kind of talked about this, I want to say almost 2 years ago now, and there wasn't a push forward, there wasn't a push back, one way or the other. Joe and I spent time at the Alliance and feel it's probably an important step. It's a much more economical option for the city than hiring somebody to try and do what they do. As I explained then, being part of the Greater Des Moines Partnership, I mean, the amount of phone calls, or just cold calls that come from the state of Iowa and being able to answer those, you could do that every day, all day. And 80% of them don't pertain to your own city, so you get halfway through these answers and realize that this wasn't really even for you. So I think there's merit to trying to include membership into this organization, and I made that comment a couple years ago, and we'll continue kind of with it this time.
So Joe has been in on these discussions?
Yeah, Joe and I spent a day at the Alliance offices, like I said, almost 2 years ago. I think that the conversation really was one of the goals or objectives when I first walked through the door was whether or not we needed to have a full-time economic development person. I think both Joe and I feel that Joe can handle Main Street and marketing and all of that, and we could or join an organization like this and have both bases covered for far less than a $70,000 to $80,000 expense for a standalone employee with limited resources.
Ron, can you talk through a little bit in terms of cost,
Yeah,
investments,
just
and all
gonna
that kind of
ask.
stuff?
Well, we have a sliding fee for all of our membership, but for particular, for a minimum, be $1,000 to be part of our organization and featured on the ICR website. If you wanted to be part of the printed material, which is a little more expensive to print the material, we did get a Hall Perrine grant from the Hall Perrine Foundation in Cedar Rapids to help underwrite some of the costs, but it would be $3,500 at the brochure level. So for your community, Mayor, if you wanted to be in the brochure, which we really think, not that we're going to try to sell you, but you are going to be expanding the community by adding more roof tops, and this could be a great marketing piece for not just the region, but specifically for Mount Vernon. So it'd be $3,500 for the brochure, or $1,000 to be a member and be on the website.
So then a total of 45 before.
Pardon?
Total of 45?
No,
Or
it's 35.
would cover both?
35 is you included in the website and the brochure. 1,000 would just be the website.
So I think from an investment standpoint, it's kind of hard to argue with, but I think it's obviously vital that you guys do everything up front.
Absolutely. And then I would assume, be able to connect to that, like from our site and from Lester Burr's site.
Absolutely.
Just expand that web, okay.
And obviously, the community, we'd also provide you with the publications, and if some of your companies here in town wanted to use that, Cornell College maybe specifically as a recruiting tool for professors that they're trying to recruit here. So it isn't just a piece for Rockwell, it's for everybody.
I didn't notice, did Peoria, because you guys are planning on modeling after this, correct?
Similar, the front of the brochure will be some statistics on the region, obviously the map, and then we get into community profiling. So it's similar, it's not gonna be the exact layout, but we share that with you only so you kind of have a concept.
Do you know if places, like, so I'm just open a page here, Caterpillar is featured and then CityLink, I don't have any clues who they are. Do you know if they paid for those? I mean, they're just photos, so I'm assuming it's just a, hey, look, Caterpillar is here kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure about
Just
that.
curious.
Typically not.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, if it was an
It's a
ad,
sales,
it
yeah,
would
it's
be.
kind of a sales pitch to you,
Yeah.
what we have here, but.
Unlikely if I do this in Cornell or
Yeah.
You guys have made references to websites. What about in terms of social media? What are you doing in terms of social media? I have a marketing background, so I'm always thinking about driving traffic. What's gonna help drive traffic in terms of web and social media traffic to us? I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
most of our social media isn't done locally, it's more done outside of the region, and we use an organization called Sculpt.
Mhm.
And what they are doing is, your expertise in this, there's a way to identify people that used to live here or check, if they looked at the Mount Vernon Sun or the Cedar Rapids Gazette, then immediately advertisement goes back to them about, hey, why don't you come back to the area? So they, most of our social media is that way. But what Jamie also said, we have the alumni list that we work, and so when we go to the away football games, we'll send the alumni in that area from University of Iowa and say, have you ever thought about, moving back? So really, that target demographic is someone that may be in their late 20s, early 30s, that left the communities, experienced the big city life, and is looking to come back for a little more, better quality of life.
You mean like half of my high school?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we have a lot of case studies in that already, and so I think it would
Including
be
myself.
an easy sell.
And on the membership side, that's the talent hub that, Rod's referring to, but on the membership side, just the ICR website in general, they're always creating content, so their SEO is, their search engine optimization is always up. So they would actually look for, hey, is Caterpillar doing anything new, are they expanding? They put that on the site and that gets more hits too, so.
Anybody else have any questions? I mean, we don't need to make a choice obviously right now tonight, but I think it was important to get Ron and Jamie in front of the council and.
Probably an observation more than a question, that is with regard to the economic development side of what you do. And that is that, I'm no expert on this, but I appreciate the attitude which the north part of the corridor has with regard to attracting business. Because from my perspective, just reading the Gazette, it seems like the south part of the corridor buys business. And I'm not sure, time will tell whether that'll be successful or not, but I mean, you've challenged businesses moving from downtown Cedar Rapids to Hiawatha, for example, or vice versa. Why throw money at things like that and so on. I think you've got a better perspective on the north side of the corridor than the south side. That's just on that economic development niche, an observation.
So obviously, we've made this presentation, and you have to deliberate to see if this is something you want to do. Mayor, we can also let you know how our meetings go with Centerpoint and Ely, if that's important, to know what the other small towns are doing. I know that Tiffin will be part of it, and Solon will from the south end of the corridor, but just if you needed it all out of curiosity, we can also let you know.
To Tom's point, assuming we move forward with this, does that limit our ability to compete for businesses against other towns that are also partners? And not that I want to go out and headhunt, but I don't want to tie our hands or anything.
Again, this piece is specifically designed to attract workforce
Okay.
here. So this,
Wouldn't have any bearing on that.
no, because actually, more people are wanting to live in the smaller towns. I mean, we're seeing that just from a trending standpoint. One of the reasons that you, here in the city of Mount Vernon, have decided to, build two new neighborhoods on the west and on the northeast side. So you're helping, because one of the things that people look for is housing. And young kids today, if they live in a large city, as you know, Seattle, places, they can't even afford, you know, a home. And we're here in Iowa, they still can, so,
Okay, anybody else?
great, thank you.
Thank you
for
both very much.
Ron,
Ron, we'll be
we
in
need
touch.
this copy.
Thanks, Ron. Be in touch. All right. As I mentioned, we got a lot to get to tonight, so I'm gonna kind of fly through some of the stuff. Consent agenda, approval of council minutes from the September 16th to the 23rd. Approval of liquor license, Gary's Foods, Vernon's Pizza Palace. Appoint Matt Nelson to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Dean Borg and Nora Meyer to Board of Appeals. Appoint Lauren Conley and Bill Willis as assistant building officials. And appoint Caroline Kelly and Grace Chamberlain to the Historic Preservation Commission. With that said, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda. I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to all those individuals who put their name forth. Next item, public hearing. Public hearing on the proposed budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2020. And I now open the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to address the council on this item? Seeing no one, close the public hearing. Move on to resolution 10/7/2019A, approving amendment 1 to the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. Chris?
I don't have a lot to add. Again, typically, in a normal year, we'll try to get closer to the end of the year. However, given the timing of our projects and the fact that we've got a number of projects that are across fiscal years, it's kind of imperative that we do this amendment now, just to keep the books clean.
If anybody has any questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 10-7-2019A, approve amendment 1 through fiscal year 1920 budget.
I'll second.
All in favor? I'm sorry. Any comments? No comments, roll call please, Sue.
Sherman.
Yes.
Rotabush.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Weisler.
Yes.
All right, next item, public hearing on the final plat of Wolrab Pleasant View. I will open the public hearing on this item. Is there anybody that would like to address the council? Seeing no one, close the public hearing. Move on to resolution 10/7/2019B, approving the final plat of Wolrab Pleasant View addition within the 2-mile extraterritorial district. Chris?
This is just inside the 2-mile area. We may recommending changing these codes because we don't feel like we need a public hearing every time somebody that far away does a subdivision. We really don't have anything. We're seeing a little bit more of this as opposed to putting a lot of these farmsteads in trusts. They're actually taking smaller portions of the farm off and then giving them to their children and working different angles. Planning and zoning reviewed this lot, again, had no conditions, so.
Anybody have any questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of resolution 10-7-2019B. A second.
Any comments? No comments, roll call please, Sue.
West.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Rotabush.
Yes.
Weisler.
Yes.
All right. We'll move on to ordinance 9-16-2019A, amending the comprehensive plan and official zoning map to rezone certain property from agricultural to limited industrial with a public use overlay. Chris?
We have nothing additional at this time.
Anybody have any questions or anything on this item?
I move approval of ordinance 9-16-2019A.
I'll second.
Any comments? No comments, roll call please, Sue.
Rose,
Yes.
Weezer, West,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Brown Bush.
Yes.
Okay, next item, ordinance 8-19-2019A, amending Article 910, parking for personal and recreational vehicles, and zoning regulations of the municipal code of Mount Vernon. This is the third and final reading. We have in front of us. Does anybody start? Please step
Sure.
forward, name and address, please.
My name is Jeremy Coons. I live at 712 4th Avenue Northwest. I really just sort of have some questions because I read the article in the paper and my neighbor was quoted in it, so I went over and talked to her a little bit, and I'm just trying to understand it a little bit. I'm not for or opposed to it at all. I just don't quite understand how it affects my property, because she told me she thought it did. I have a boat that I park in front of my garage. And I'm just trying to understand what changes that would make, or it's possible I was never in compliance in the first place. I realize that. For where I could park my boat, because I think I'd be in compliance if I park my boat in my garage and leave my truck outside, but not if I leave my boat where it's at and put my truck in the garage. So I'm just trying to see what kind of changes this makes and sort of, that's sort of where my question is exactly what it is. I put, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I put in a cement slab last year because I had a smaller boat. And it fit beside my garage, next to my neighbor, which might, again, not have been in compliance, I don't know. But now I have a bigger boat that's a little too wide and can't fit in that side, so I just have it right in front. And I'll abide by the law, whatever it is. I just wanted to see if this makes a change for what I have to do or what I should be doing. And I am, like I said, a little bit confused on why it's okay for me to park my truck in the same spot and not my boat. But that's sort of my question. And I don't know if there's somebody who can come look at my property and tell me if I'm doing it right, or can give me directions on how far the boat has to be away from the sidewalk, or, because we do have a sidewalk in front of our house. I think we're the only ones in the block that do.
You want Chris, he's the expert.
So I'll do my best to answer all your questions.
Okay.
Do
It's
you
probably,
live just north of Kayla?
I live across the street from you.
Right, and then
Yeah.
like one
One
kind of
over,
one house.
yeah.
So I've been there while I was at Kayla Billingsley's house. So to start, you would be correct in that based upon the existing ordinance as it's written today, you wouldn't have been compliant, Billingsley's weren't compliant. I mean, there's a number of houses that aren't compliant.
There's a lot of us that have campers
Yeah.
and boats and stuff on that block.
So this ordinance would help for a majority of the year, not necessarily all of the year. When those, I think what the Planning and Zoning Commission looked at is when those units are being used, basically May through, I think, November, or April through November, they could be parked out in front. Whereas before, I think you could do it twice in a month for 48 hours. So basically, you go camping twice a month and then bring it back and park it. So they did expand a little bit. They did not open it up year-round for the front yards. And the difficult part is, from a staff perspective, is a boat, a motorhome, a camper. It's hard to tell if they're considered in workable and licensed condition. More so than a vehicle, because we can go and make sure the tags are up to date and then request that the vehicle be moved up and down a driveway, and you can just tell that they're operational. So to comply with another portion of the code that talks about inoperable vehicles being stored on a lot or the street, I think that's kind of the basis behind what it is. I will say that when I met with Kayla, one issue that isn't part of this ordinance and may need to be further referred back to planning and zoning is the required yard setbacks. So if you look at Kayla's, for instance, she did park on the side of her house, but within the required yard setbacks, so she's only like 2 feet off the property line. To me, it's, just personal opinion, as you drive by there, you would know that she's only 2 feet off the property line, and a nice pad poured right next to their house. And one of the things that we had talked about while I was out there is some communities, when they do fence permits, for instance, require the neighbor to sign off, and then it's notarized that says they're okay with that. So there's some ways to potentially expand that. I think because planning and zoning didn't look at that, should be hard pressed to expand this ordinance change. So you have a couple options. You could probably vote this ordinance down and have P&Z relook at the entire thing. You could move forward with this, and it would, like I said, it would open the front yards to those months that P&Z had originally recognized, or you can refer this back to P&Z before taking any action.
Well,
So
and mine's not really in my yard. It's on a cement pad. It's just sort of, it's halfway in front of my garage and halfway on this pad that we poured.
yeah, so it's just a yards by definition. So we have required
Front of
yards,
the yard.
yeah. So for our purposes, and one of the questions, because I fielded a lot of phone calls in the last 2 weeks since I got the paper, which was kind of the goal of having 3 readings of an ordinance, but we don't, as a city, intentionally go out and look for violations, and we do that to avoid somebody stating that we have a vendetta against them, so we wait till we get a complaint. Unfortunately, this year we had an abundance of one, we turned the next one in. What about this, this, and this? So it was kind of a,
If I'm guilty, so.
it was kind of an interesting, circle. And so in this instance, we expand and do more so kind of citywide. But to the merits of this, that's not necessarily up for staff. We're just trying to, the reason that this original ordinance is in place is because we had 2 conflicting ordinance on the books before. One said that you couldn't do it at all in the front yard, and the other said you could do it twice a month for 48 hours. So we asked for clarification, and this is what was recommended. I do know at the original public hearing, one individual that was part of that conversation originally, so they had studied this and take a long look at whether or not to have these parked in the front yard. So I kind of laid out some avenues for you to potentially walk down if you would like. Does that answer all your questions?
Well, you did. My main question is sort of, is there some place I can put my boat other than my garage? Because I didn't know there was any kind of ordinance about where I could park it. And I had the pad put in last year professionally. I'm assuming that Kelly Concrete applied for the right permits and everything. I didn't specifically tell them I'm planning on putting a boat there. And I believe I can put it in my backyard as long as there's a cement pad there, which there is, but the mayor may tell you there's no way on earth I want to drive my truck through my neighbor's yard because you know who that is. And it's just a matter of, I have invested a significant amount of money and I have a brand new nice boat cover, and my boat runs and is licensed, but at the same sense, I'm not gonna break the rules. If the rules are, it shouldn't be there, then I won't. But I don't know if there's a way to look at it. I'm not even sure if the pad next to my house was large enough, if I could legally put it there, because we're pretty close to the next neighbor.
Yeah, and I think, I do think that is a question that's kind of back in front of you is, you have a couple different options. And one, like I said, there are 2 different scenarios. So right now, so you have a yard and then you have a required yard. So in your rear yard, if you have 40 feet, only the back 25 feet is what they call the required rear yard, which is where you can't park it, but you can park it everywhere else. The question to me is whether or not you want P&Z to look at that required rear yard, because a lot of people do park them in the required rear yard. They're still on their property.
It still has to be on cement or gravel or.
Yeah.
So the last time P&Z looked at this, they were just looking at that section
At the front
here?
yard, yes. Because that is what staff,
Right.
we had a conflict, and that's what staff asked them to. So
I understand.
you could table this and, send this back to P&Z to expand and look at the entire section, and they can make a recommendation back to you. The only comment I would have, so let me back up. If you do that, you only have one reading left, once P and Z brings you back a recommendation. You can approve this section if you
So
like it.
just on that point, so P and Z could rewrite this entire thing theoretically, and we have one more reading, basically.
You could table this and
Right,
have P and
but
Z,
that's-
yes, look at it, and they could,
I mean, it could come back as an entirely
Yeah.
different, okay, I'm not just saying that that's gonna happen, I just
Yes.
want to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes,
all right,
that's kind of why I was,
yes.
it'd be down to
Appreciate
one
that.
reading coming back.
Mhm.
You could approve this if you're comfortable with this language, and then still refer back to P and Z to look at both the side and required rear yard setbacks and any expanded conditions there.
In which case, we'd get another 3.
I will tell you that Jeremy is definitely not the only one that is in this boat, and
Pardon the pun.
Yeah.
I see it a lot when I'm driving around town, and again, you know, I made this comment to Kayla, I was like, I'm glad we operate the way that we do, because it would be difficult for me if we didn't.
And that's not the intent of any of this, was.
No,
No, and that's not what I'm here saying.
No,
I'm
no,
just trying to
no.
say.
No.
Well, I think the specifics of your situation would best be handled individually, by having somebody come out and say, all right, here's what
I
we
can tell you that I already looked at it
Yeah,
Probably has to go in the garage, would be my guess.
yeah.
right
Like
now.
Chris mentioned, I mean, we have had individuals call and complain about whether it's a boat or camp or whatever it is. I mean, at the same time, we have to take those calls seriously.
Mhm.
We are where we are right now. So it sounds like what you are kind of recommending without recommending is go ahead and approve this, maybe send it back to P and Z and have them review the,
So unless you're going to open the front yard, unless you want to open up front yard parking year-round,
I don't think.
then I would approve this and then refer back to P and Z to discuss this further as it relates to front and side yards, or side and back yards.
So like that makes no sense.
Sorry, I have another question, just to make sure I'm clear that I know what I can do. It's okay for me to put my boat in my garage whenever I want, and park my truck in the front, because I be going to work on a regular basis, so it'll move enough.
Correct.
Where it's not just stationary.
This is what I would say to everybody here as far as how staff would handle this. If you refer this back to P and Z, so if you would approve this and refer this back to P and Z, we would limit enforcement until P and Z made a recommendation back to council. So to answer your question, you could leave it out there right now and we wouldn't come and tell you to move it. Until after, like I said, you made a decision one way or the other, and then it would be, again, we would put it out in the paper that says this is what the ordinance is. And in this instance, we're giving people as much time as we can when we do come out, so if this ends up being it, we'd still give everybody plenty of notice, because again, there's a lot of people that are in your boat that we don't ask why you're widening your driveway or doing, I mean, we sometimes can make assumptions, but we know that there's a personal stake and an investment in all of this too, so explaining it that way to you, like I said, if you're not going to open it up in the front yard year-round, then approve this, and then we would refer back to P and Z to look at it.
Yeah.
If it does go back to P and Z, Jeremy, it's gonna take, quite honestly, months. It'll go back, and then if we end up having to do 3 readings, I mean,
It'll be 4 months.
yeah.
I mean,
Minimum.
we probably won't do anything for the next 4 months as far as enforcement is concerned.
I don't think anybody's looking for a rush decision
No.
anyway, so. I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
And I also appreciated Kayla's letter. I thought it was very respectful, and you've been very respectful. You know, it's a challenging situation. We want to make sure that we're fair. And
Well, I just make a statement with that too, is I assume there was a reason for it. People weren't just saying, over to get all this stuff moved. I mean, there's obviously reasons why you want those things not always there. I would agree that I don't want a bunch of, you know, for lack of a nicer way to say it, a bunch of junk in people's front yards without,
Right.
you know, there's reasons for the rules. I just wanted to make sure I knew what was going on.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue right now is that, more so, I mean, boats and a few other of these get kind of lumped in together, but especially rec vehicles, motor homes, a lot of them are being plugged in because they don't empty their refrigerators when they would come home. So if you think about, I mean, the whole point for setbacks originally were to keep a distance safe so that that we could fight fires in between and not have this kind of Chicago fire.
Yeah.
So,
Well, boats get plugged in too.
yeah, so the bigger concern is a lot of them, and the Billingsley's was that day, and it made complete sense, they were leaving that weekend, but, so I think it's how much maybe with some agreements between neighbors and things like that, that might be beneficial that we just explore. So I would say to you that I think there are other things that they can look at, whether or not they recommend them to you, I think is up to them, obviously, but.
Yeah, I would not be in favor of tabling, just,
Yeah.
it would feel, I think, with coming back with just one reading, like if we do a wholesale change on a lot of this,
I agree.
that we're shoving it down. I don't know that we do, but I don't want it to feel like we're cramming something through,
Yep, I
then,
agree.
It would
we
give
don't
people
really need to.
another opportunity though, to come and speak to people.
And I would prefer they have as many
State education as
opportunities
well.
to do that as possible, so.
I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
So it sounds like you make a motion.
I would make a motion to approve the third and final reading of the ordinance in front of us, which is number 8-19-2019.
I'll second.
Any other comments? Roll call, please, Sue.
Weisler,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Roundabout,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
I know it's not part of the motion, but I'm assuming obviously.
I was just
Yeah.
gonna say, can we make a note for the record, we'd like to send it back to the
And I assume they're aware of our conversations and kind of what the challenges
Probably,
are.
I would make that assumption only in that if they're reading the paper, then they are, but Heather's been on maternity leave, so our first meeting's this month, but Matt and I will attend. They'll know for sure by the end of this month.
That's why I assume it's gonna be here. All right, next item, ordinance 9/3/2019A, creating a public use overlay district for property locally described as 855 Palisades Road Southwest. Third and final reading. I assume you don't have anything else, right? Chris? You share on this one?
No.
Then I would make a motion to approve the third and final reading for ordinance 9-3-2019.
I'll second.
Any comments? Roll call.
Well, just one comment about it. I don't know how we can have 855 on the east side of 10th Avenue. Do the numbering there, but that, I think the cast was already.
No, it's Palisades.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah.
Yeah. The addressing, if you go look at Palisades in general, is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It was either fix and have the outlier or go with what had been done. We chose to go
We
with
could
what
just
had
pick
been
a
done.
number that we thought was cool.
It was rough.
17 less.
It's really
First
rough.
Road.
You just have to go down and look at the map and it's,
Yeah, it's awesome.
so we do it by committee, addressing by committee, so I put addresses down and then Nick comes and looks at it. That's how we're doing it now, because even in Stonebrook, the road goes like this, up and around. So we don't have anything normal in Mount Vernon in the way of addressing.
Only my only observation.
Okay.
Sue, roll call, please.
Did we have a second?
Yes.
Roundabout,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Weisler,
Yes.
Herman, yes.
Yes.
All right, next item, discussion and consideration of amendment 4 to OPN contract for the LDC. We'll need a motion to untable this.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chris?
Justin Bishop, who is the principal on the project, and Matthew, who is the project architect, are both here. At the last meeting, we tabled, you had some questions, and we wanted to invite them here, so they are here. Invite them up. I did talk to Justin earlier in the day and just kind of presented him with what my take was as far as where the questions were going, so was to address those and if you have any other questions of it.
Good evening.
Hi.
Justin Bishop with OPN Architects. Thank you for your time. It's been a long but fun and rewarding project for us. I know there's probably been different items that come up at different times. We appreciate the opportunity to come and just speak with you and answer any questions that you may have on that. So we submitted an amendment to our original fee based on a contract that was set up, and we can sort of look at the details of it, but really in short, as the contract period becomes delayed, that takes more time for us, and that's really all we have as architects is our time of what's going on there. So there's sort of different components of that, of what happens when a delay happens. There's some things that just shift, and some things that are redundant and actually take more time. So certain things like reviewing a drawing or a detail would shift, and we're not asking for more fee for those things. That's what's already covered in our fee. We're just simply outlining the extension of time. So whether that's for more meetings, more site visits, things like that, that's really what's added up for us as we think about it. It was originally projected to be about a 10-month period. We're now looking at 2 more months, another 20% of construction time. So that's what we're asking your consideration for, and we'll be happy to answer any questions on that.
I probably threw you under the bus on this issue of bringing this up and so on, but it was hard enough to swallow the cost for the extended construction time with Garland, which we did a couple months ago, I think, right?
Yeah.
But the scope of the project didn't change. I mean, yes, you can say the time line changed, but we're still building the same 32,000 square foot building with, 24, 34, whatever it is, change orders on it, but the scope of the building hasn't changed anything. So that's why it was just hard for me to swallow
Yeah.
Architect.
I could give another example maybe if it would help.
Especially at the tail end of it, that's what I was.
Right, right. And luckily, I was trying to share with Chris, this is only amendment number 4. And for me personally, in OPN, we never nickel and dime, right? This is a 20% change in that construction period, so it was big enough that we felt it was worth coming to, not asking for things that come up on every project, right? So we're trying to be fair from that standpoint too. I think the example might be, if there's a month that has limited progress on construction, and let's say they got 50% of their work done that month that we thought they would or could, we don't have a 50% less meetings. We still have the meeting. We still have site visits. There's things that, no matter what, are taking time as the time passes. Does that help give an example at all, Tom?
Nope.
Nope?
So the one that the one that did make sense to me that you gave me today was, the contract called for like 30 site visits. So we expected bi-weekly construction meetings. Well, we did hold all of those meetings even when nothing was actually going on. We held them here. So we're at like meeting 36 already, and we probably have 8 to 10 more left to go. So that was, like I said, that was the example that did make some sense to me today.
Yeah, so the contract had 30 site visits, and it was originally set for a 24-month period of our services, and we're at month 30 now. So that was fine, and we're not asking for changes along those lines, but just looking at the letter of the contract, that is accurate.
Well, what I have a problem with is, okay, it was 10 months, now it's 12. And so you're asking for 2 more months. I can understand somewhere in between 2 months, but when it was 35 below zero, there was nothing getting done for 2. I mean, it was cold, there was nothing getting done, and I kind of find it hard to believe that OPN was working their butts off for those couple weeks when it was so, I mean, you pulled guys off and go to different projects. Nobody was going out to that site and going around when it was that cold. I just have a problem with 2 months. Now, if you say 5 weeks of that time, okay, but I just have a hard time that all 8 weeks has got to, you guys were warranted as far as use of your labor, so that's
Yeah,
where
I
I'm
respect
at
that.
there.
I understand that. I think that's the initial comment that I tried to suggest is there's certain things that shifted, right? So those activities that we weren't reviewing, some of those things, right, shifted. And that's where the way I structured the amendment was to simply fill the gap from substantial completion of where it was where the new is. So we're not asking for more fee above and beyond past the contract. We still have fee to do all the closeout and all the things that we need to do anyway. So again, just trying to be very transparent and very fair on our time and what we've invested in it so far.
So with respect to the budget, Justin, have you looked at, are there ways that in this next 2 months, you guys can change the way you're working? You know, for example, if Chris knew that calling you into every meeting is going to be an additional amount of money, maybe he could make a better use of your time by only having you in every other week or something like that. Have you thought about that at all?
We have, and that's not the approach we've taken. We want to make sure that we're keeping everything on track and being there present when we need to be. That's definitely something, that's the factor, right? How much time we put in would be impacting response times or when we're on site, things like that. I would not want to slow anything down if that was the result of it. I'm open to other suggestions, but I think
I would hate to see that as we're hitting crunch time. I would hate to see
Well,
something getting missed just to say the truth.
Yeah,
I just want to know if it was considered, if it wasn't.
yeah, I think, you know, I'm doing my best to bite my lip. As far as where we're at, why we're here, I mean, there's kind of a root cause of this extension and where we are in the whole process. It's been challenging. And my bigger concern is, now more than ever, I do need the design professionals and Vernon, you know, Intertech here, because they've got now, I mean, we've kind of laid this deadline out in front of them, and now is the time where you start to see corners cut. And so I think that's the frustration that I have is it's a domino effect from the entire start of where we're at in this project. Now, on the flip side, you know, we came into this project sitting really, really well. I mean, the bids were $900,000 less than where we expected them to be. So, I mean, there's some silver lining to that. We're eating into that, obviously, not to the extent that I thought we would. I thought we would actually have a few more change orders and a little bit more money out. But to answer your question, I would struggle. Nick and I get there every day, every other day when we can. I don't want to speak for Nick, but there's some things that we question. We don't know whether or not it was designed to be that way or not.
I understand. I
so-
just needed to understand the process better.
From a pure dollar standpoint, how much are we talking?
25,000.
25,000?
I estimated around 25,000 if we went out to January 2nd, I think.
Right, and that to me is important. I think this time, you know, obviously Matt has made a lot of progress in a lot of the marketing materials and those sorts of things. And again, with my marketing hat on, I see that January launch date is pretty darn important, because taking advantage of those New Year's resolutions and that sort of thing is going to help our case for memberships, right? And so if us agreeing to these additional funds is going to help that case to get it done on time, you know, and with hopefully fewer errors
So is it
or done.
25K or zero? I mean, is this negotiable? What if we come back and say 15, 18?
you know, the way I structured the language in the amendments was based on the weekly hours that we're putting in.
Yeah,
And so it's.
that's what I saw, it was a $2,500.
I just provided an estimate
That was
of where we would.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's.
Well, I just think it's important.
So I think that's.
Any contractor's negotiations, so is it, we start at 25 and that's it, or is that where we start?
I am usually not in the position to negotiate those things, just simply because I'm truly coming with full transparency. I'm not here to make money. and try to pad the coffers. I'm just trying to cover the costs that we have, and that is straight line, flat costs of where we're at. There's no extra markup or percentage or anything on that. So if that's what it takes us to negotiate, it's better than zero, but I'm trying to be completely honest here and fully transparent.
So I very much believe that having professional eyes on the project from now until completion is hugely important, and it will yield us dividends. Anybody who's built anything knows when everybody's rushing to the end, that's when people start getting sloppy or cutting corners. And we don't want that to happen, because we're gonna have to live with this thing forever.
Yeah.
So to me, $25,000, while it is a big amount of money, it still is money well spent that drives our contractor to conclusion in a manner that we want them to get there. It's unfortunate that we're in this situation, and we're really not addressing the root cause of the problem, because it isn't you.
Yeah.
But you're here taking the brunt.
Yeah.
So, I guess that's my feeling on the OPN side of things. On the other side, I would like to know if we have any fallback or recourse to anything else. And if we don't, that is where we are.
And I don't want to spend much time on that.
Yeah, I would never say never. I would say if we were playing percentages less than 30-40%, that you're gonna find any reason to really want to go that route.
Yeah, will cost us more legal fees.
Right, exactly.
Tom, were you getting ready to?
In the interest of transparency, if nothing else, you have educated me personally as an owner and representing owners, whether it's city or city council, whatever, to consider quantifying in a base contract. I mean, you have a 12 or 10-month contract, whatever this was, so you figure average number of bad weather days. But to quantify 10, 20, 30, whatever, giving you this X number of days in this contract for bad weather. And it's mutually decided at the time whether this is a construction day or not a construction day. That may be valid to have as an owner in future contracts of this scope and that length of time. So if nothing else, I've been educated, unless somebody else can come up with a better example to address the weather-related issue that you can control that you just referenced, yeah.
Yeah.
So that we're not stuck, $25,000. I recognize the importance and the symbolism of this, getting this building done and done right. And I don't want to kill the deal. But I would be remiss if I didn't express my kind of disappointment in this, coming forward to have this discussion. But I don't want to kill the deal here, and I want to keep it a positive, upbeat, an opening here, because this is a big deal for Mount Vernon. So that's where I stand.
I got one thing. Originally, OPN's bid was based on the amount of the construction, right? Like
6% of the project.
Yeah, 6%. So this is where I got a problem. OPN based their bid on a percentage, not on a time schedule, on a percentage of the cost of the facility. Now, if they want to come back and say we added $150,000, $200,000, $500,000 and then hit it with 6%, that, because you're changing the scenario here. You're going from a percentage to now, the schedule's changed and now we're adding to the schedule. Theirs wasn't based on a 10-month schedule, it was based on 6%. See, it's changing the scenario here. That's what I have a problem with. If they wanted to come back and said you added $400,000, thus we're going to hit it with 6%, I can understand it. But now they're saying, well, it's 2 months longer, which had nothing to do with the 6%, and now we're adding on to it. That's what I have a problem with. The scenario is completely different there.
Can I interject one point?
Okay?
Section 4 outlines 30 site visits by the architect over the duration of the project construction, and we're over 35 right now.
Right.
And not done.
And
So
that's,
truly based.
well, that's true, and that shouldn't be in there then. That's one I wouldn't have in there, because like I said, you're based on the 6%. So you're based on amount, not on a time schedule. it's conflicting. Like I said, if you would've hit it, like I said, we had 400,000, I wouldn't have a problem, 6% of 400,000, that's the difference.
Well, but I,
I have, it just manipulates the thing. You're going from percentage to a time schedule.
and I don't wanna be seen as defending one side or the other, I'm just, so this is a standard AI contract, and it's a standard in engineering. So we always, if you look at any of our contracts, we'll always have an hourly rate, we have a production rate, so they'll give us a base fee, which they do, and they all do, and then they give us, you know, similar to items as to what we have here. If it goes over the norm, we get this. And so those are spelled out in the contract. If you go back and look at the original contract, it's all there. It's just been a series of interesting events. We hedged, as a city, I will say this, we hedged our bets on the fact that we've had some really good winters and expected to be at certain points when February, you know, late January, February hit. You know, late January, February killed us. And we've been kind of dealing with the repercussions ever since. But I just want to say, most of the firms that I deal with will give us a percent of the cost, and then they will always tack in that what if factor depending on what happens to the project. And I would not expect, if we were talking about the original timeline, so when we were getting into October, pushing back the substantial completion into October, I would have probably said, I don't agree with this. We are pushing it out to January, which isn't really OPM's problem. It's elsewhere, and that's been the biggest issue is that when you talk about repercussions to add into this conversation, the answer is yes. But by the time that we fight it, pay for our attorney's fees, which we won't, recuperate, chances of us getting a substantial amount of money where we're at probably is not significant. I think those just odds are probably not there. And I've gone this route. And the one that I did, we started at 1.9 million and we ended at 750,000. I mean, that was the settlement. So if you can imagine that this would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 200,000 by the time that you got through this process. If you paid the attorney's fees the same that we had to do there, it was $150,000 worth of attorney's fees. So net, they came out with $600,000 to do some corrections. So at the end of the day, those are the odds that we're kind of sitting here playing. I don't necessarily like them, and my staff and I talk about this all the time. There's a cost-benefit ratio here, and we're right within the margins.
The problem is both sides know.
Yeah. So if you look at the amount of change orders that we've had, right? And you apply that 6% fee in there, right? That's $8,000. That's nothing.
I would echo Deb's statements earlier regarding wanting as many eyes on site at the end as possible, so.
Well, it sounds like we have a motion ready to go, because we do need a motion.
Yeah, I just want to make a statement that, I don't have any question about hourly rates. I worked for advertising agencies for almost 15 years, and that's how I build my time too. And so when you told me about the time in meetings and site visits, and gave me more explanation of the more tangible things, that helped me to understand where the time is. So I agree as well, that especially because we are, on a tighter timeline now, I do think it's important not to cut the corners. But I just needed to understand it better than just seeing that dollar figure sitting out there and what that time was. So thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I think if I could leave on a positive note, there's been an extreme amount of sort of excitement in our own office for this project across all the studios, and even broader. We like to share our work sometimes, and even at a national level, there was some really good buzz. So I'm excited for what it's going to do for this community. I'm excited for what the project has become. I'm excited for the current budget and the percentage of change orders overall. is gonna be a poster child for us to show what can be done when there's really good documents and a good team put together. So overall, I just really appreciate the opportunity and the ability to come in and speak with you all, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 4 to the opening contract.
I'll second.
All
Oh,
in
sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Go home and have a beer. Just don't charge us for it.
Chris, did you need me to stay for any of the others?
I don't think so.
All right, next item, consideration of claims list. Anybody have any questions, otherwise entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the claims list.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have about 7 change orders we'll run through. The first one is,
We do the
or
payout
I'm
first.
sorry, pay application and change order. First one is discussion consideration of pay application number 10 for the LBC. Chris?
This pay application is for 641, 459.56. It is in line with where they're at in the process right now, so.
Entertain a motion, unless anybody has any questions.
Make a motion to approve the application number 10.
Second?
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll get into the change orders. First one is change order number 28. Chris?
If I can, I'll just run through all of these. You have to vote on them separately, but, so where you see deducted in my report, that is money coming back to the city. So we had about, not quite $8,000 in credits basically back to, actually over that. So change orders 28, 34, 35, and 36 were all credits back. Change order 30 was actually because we did the security package separately, so there was some movement of data and electric boxes when we finally got Tri-City on board. So those are some minor modifications. I'm going to skip 32 and I'll come back to that one. 33, for those that actually took a tour and you saw the transition where those smooth ducts were, for $2,500, I really don't want to leave those smooth duct transitions in there. Based upon the bid, it was open-ended, so they didn't put a size on how big or small that those transitions had to be. So this is, I will say this is kind of an aesthetic thing, but it is right there in front of you every time you're walking around that track. And basically what it is all the large ductwork that you see that's being painted and exposed is spiraled. It has almost looks like a piece of wire that goes all the way around it. And then the transitions, and most of the transitions are about yay big, are smooth, but they're so small typically that you can't really tell that it's not intended to be spiral. Both of the transitions I'm talking about are like this, and they stick out like a sore thumb. So, and then going back to change order 32, we went back and forth a little bit on this one, and based upon the rooftop units and location, I'd love to argue this one, I just can't. It's in the specifications, and the ductwork has to change in order to get to the filter location. So, all in all, I did include where we're at in change orders, and I will say, on any project that I've ever been a part of, we are 75% of the way through this, and we have only used maybe a third of our allocation. So out of the 386, we've used about $130,000. So I do know two, that I have a feeling that will be larger that are still potentially coming. Maybe one, but, that will deal with the flooring and how much moisture is coming up from the ground. So, I just know that one's kinda hanging out there. I don't know how much that one will be. Remember, we got rid of the barrier one and waited till we got to this point. Arguments all along that, but I just know that that one's gonna hang out there. But I do not think that we're going to spend another $200,000 in change orders. There's just not that many requests out there. So, going back to, like I said, I do have to give OPM some kudos in that regard because this is from a percentage standpoint, this is pretty decent.
So back to 32 though, so the way it's designed now, you can't access the filters?
So you can access the filters, but it's extremely limited, so if we want to do the maintenance in-house, they did have to essentially change their ductwork. So they didn't specify the units when they did the design. They didn't specify the brand. So we knew there were going to be minor modifications when all of this stuff got connected, but
Who's they? When you say they, didn't specify?
so the design team didn't specify the actual units, the brand units themselves. They just have to meet capacity, essentially. So there's 2 or 3 different brands that they can utilize, and then they can substitute as well. So going, looking at 36, that's a substitution from what was originally designed.
And it just seems that.
And I would say, I will say this, of all the subcontractors, this one has, the ductwork has a local flair. Docker has got a local representative, so I trust that we're seeing.
It just seems like they messed up there. You always make something so it can be maintained easily. And if you design something that right away that's poorly designed that you can't maintain, and then you have to drop 15 grand on it to fix it, that's just bad.
I would say the design portion of that is questionable up there, so I don't know if you've seen, we have the large auditorium roof that drops down, and it actually drops down into a cubby, and that's where the 4 handling units are, and then it comes back up. So we're a little concerned about snow and those handling units, and so
Stretch of netting across it to catch it?
yeah, it'll be something that we keep a close eye on right now, because it is a concern. It does have 4 drains, 2 normal drains and then 2 overflow drains in that little cubby area, so hopefully water leaking into the building won't be an issue, but I've never seen a flat roof not leak at some point, ever.
Water finds a way.
So,
Yeah.
And the net on all these, not to minimize Eric's concerns, but the net on all these is about 10 grand by the time you add with the additions back in, so.
I agree with what Eric said, for sure, but at this point, what do we do? Which, that's not a right answer either, but with all that said,
We have to do these individually, yes.
Yep, 7 on them, so if we want,
I'll start
Kick us off.
change order number 28. I'll make a motion to approve change order 28.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
You know, motion for change order number 30?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I'll make a motion to approve change order 32.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I'll make a motion to approve change order number 33.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to approve change order number 34.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Make a motion on change order number 35?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Happy to make a motion to approve change order 36.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, all right. Discussion and consideration of pay application number 4 for the wastewater treatment.
This project's been a lot quieter from
Don't be jinxed.
construction perspective. Well,
Not yet.
it hasn't been, it's been about the same as far as the cost of construction and the amount of change orders from a percentage standpoint, but this pay application is in the amount of $417,886.41, and you can see that B&K has already signed off on the recommendation.
Any questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of pay application number 4 for wastewater treatment. $417,866.41.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Matthew, keep this short and sweet.
Well, I instructed Nick to staple them down back there unless you have any questions.
Yeah. Discussion and consideration of rental agreement guidelines and application for the LBC. I assume everybody had opportunity.
Yeah, none of the rates have really changed. This is just guidelines, and I think Matt and Sarah did an excellent job putting them together, and then we sat down for about 2 hours apiece on the unit and just kind of went through each of the documents. I would imagine that we will be making minor tweaks to these as we move forward, but for the most part, we've got a good baseline, and I think if you're reading this as we take pre-reservations for the facility, you'll have a good understanding of what you can and can't do and what you're responsible for, so,
And that'll be key.
yes.
Are we gonna have, I mean, a lot of these reference, if you're gonna do this, then you also need this form, if you're gonna do this, you also, are we just gonna have like a packet that says here's, or is it gonna be somebody's gonna be there you can talk to, say, okay, here's what I'm looking to do, and they'll hand you the form?
So there are,
He saw his opportunity and he's taking it.
Yep.
so they'll be individualized. So Matt and Sarah will be able to answer questions, and then we might have one other additional staff person that will be able to answer questions, but there'll be packages.
Okay.
Some of these will be combined into packages, so I think Matt's talked about like a birthday package, so you probably want this room, and this room, and they'll sell it as a
Right.
package.
And here's the thing you need
Yeah.
for that.
Here's the marketing materials for it, please review it, here's your request form, get it back to us, and
Yeah.
we'll step forward with that. And so,
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
really, it'd just be Sarah, myself, and one other person would be in charge of rentals,
Right.
so that it's not across the board, and the front desk staff person won't be able to, so you'll be able to control it a little bit.
And I assume this wasn't something that you guys just created, obviously. Best practices from other locations.
We have investigated over 100
That's
facilities.
what it
Yeah.
looked like.
That's why.
And that's probably being minimal,
Yeah.
yeah, and we found one facility that operates like us in the country right now.
Otherwise, does anybody have any questions on the rental agreements and applications?
The only thing, that, and not to get too deep into specifics, but there was one, it looked like smoking was allowed on the patio.
It is not.
Okay.
It follows the same procedures as.
Okay, so there was some phrasing in there about like smoking inside the facility isn't allowed, but, so, and I'm not saying we
Smoking
need
and
to
use
get
of any
into it
tobacco
now.
product or electronic smoking device by any person in any publicly owned facility is prohibited at all times.
In any public.
And then it says City of Mount Vernon Ordinance, Chapter 4709, so then just reference.
As long as it covers, that's, I just,
Yeah,
I
the entire
assumed it
property
wasn't allowed on a
is
patio,
smoke-free.
so I just wanted to make sure.
And I'm sure we'll have signs up that state that is.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I could contract your stuff.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you for your
We'll get to
thoroughness.
that.
Well, I can't take all the credit. I mean, I thank you all for having Sarah start July 1st because she's been a godsend for a lot of this, doing research and finding information and bouncing ideas. And we've spent the last month and a
Yeah,
half
this was,
creating this document, these documents, as well as others, but just having another person to sound that off on and exchange ideas with has been truly a blessing, so
And I
thank you.
think what Chris said is really important, that you can always edit it.
Yeah, we know,
mhm.
this won't be the final document
Yeah.
when we start forward, so we're still tweaking things.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would say on kind of the membership guidelines is you'll notice there's an ACH. We will not take monthly credit cards because we do not want to be responsible for the credit card information.
That's good.
The ACH is easy for us, we do that through the banks, but we do not want to have people's credit card numbers on our servers or be responsible for those
That level of
breaches, so.
security.
You'll still be able to use a credit card, kind of one-time purchases,
general
but you won't be able to give us your credit card and maintain it on file.
So you could come in and do your annual membership, knock it out.
Correct.
Correct.
Right,
But
we're
on a
not
monthly
gonna do-
basis, you
Yeah,
can't
we're not
do
gonna
that.
do the monthly on a credit card.
We even talked to the bank and they don't do that either,
Yeah.
so we talked to,
They'll do an ACH, but not a
Okay.
credit card.
yeah, not a credit card, yeah.
You can
So-
do ACH, you can still do ACH.
And you just fill out the
What-
ACH
yeah.
form.
The credit card kind of crosses a line that they suggested to us that we need.
So what is the difference there? Do we not store the ACH information?
We do. It's in a
Okay.
locked cabinet, and similar to the bank, they recommended some procedures and policies to follow as well.
Okay.
So we will have those on site in a locked file cabinet. That's the only way we can do it.
Matt, are any of these rates something that you compare to the high school rates? Are they published yet?
The
Because they
rates
take-
for rental,
Yeah.
yeah,
There was one basketball court. I mean, they need to be
so,
comparable and they need to stick to their guns and not be,
yeah, our conversations with the school districts, we presented, these are gonna be our rates. They took it as, we wanna be comparable to you, so there's no competition necessarily. But we did not require them to go with any rates. They, I believe, have not gone to the board yet with their rates, but they've let the public know that they're gonna be charging the second semester of the year.
And you're getting some really good feedback, I heard.
They're getting some really good feedback, and they are, the ball's in their court as far as how they approach it.
I have no problem with the new facility setting established rates and, having them pretty set for the future. An existing institution with a different policy with how they've handled equipment and space rental, and question, will they stick to it?
It's a different
And
conversation.
Yeah.
so that we don't lose our integrity.
Sure.
in the process.
And I can honestly tell you, the feedback that we've received from those parties that are concerned about the school charging have no issues with us and what we're charging.
That's,
The ones that have come forward and had comments.
Okay.
And the need is gonna drive it regardless.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't anticipate, even if the school district charged less than us, I don't anticipate we would not be able to fill most, if not all, of our rental opportunities. I really feel confident with that.
That's, yeah, I'm right there with you.
Okay, Scott noticed that I was over here squirming just a little bit, and very sensitive to storing data. We are collecting a tremendous amount of personal data on this release of liability form. We have a good, safe way to store this data. We're not putting it in a spreadsheet. We're not, I'm asking
Yeah.
because there are laws
Mhm.
that prevent us from doing things like that.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure that we aren't exposing ourselves because we're collecting it.
Yeah.
We have a reason to collect it,
Yeah.
that's fine, but it's what we do with it and how we store it where that liability comes into. play.
Correct. And we're taking recommendations from the bank of what other organizations do and how they provide the information to the bank, so.
No, I'm
No,
talking
no,
about.
yeah.
I'm
Personal
talking-
information is similar to what you would do here. So our offsite security is handled by Iowa Solutions, and then our in-site security. So we do not maintain servers.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
The
this.
paper
piece of
files,
paper.
no, so they are under lock and key, so they are in a separate file cabinet under lock and key, and they're limited as to who can get into that. So basically myself, Sarah, and Matt.
Well, Deb, how is this any different than what we keep at the swimming pool?
It's, all I'm cautioning us all,
Sure.
is
No.
the world is
Which is
changing
a
a
good-
lot
I
in
mean-
this
Well,
area,
I mean,
and let us
This
be
is very similar to
cognizant.
that.
I'm just,
Yeah, no, I'm
Caution us to
saying
be
your
cognizant of
point
it.
is valid.
Yes.
Yeah.
so, I just wanna make sure that if we collect it, it is,
Yeah, I think that the challenge obviously over there is we're gonna have a lot of fingers, but the intent is similar to what we have here. There are specific keys and all this, or people get them.
If I recall, we have the same sensitive issue, or common information here at this facility as we would at the wellness center.
Yes.
that's fine. Again, it's just the world that I live in, and I get a little
Understood.
Yes.
squeamish.
Yep.
When we collect it on pieces of paper.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
what we do with those pieces of paper and that data, people sit down, they do spreadsheets, right?
Yeah.
So We shouldn't put things like this probably in a spreadsheet.
Well, we are required to put it in a spreadsheet to get it to the bank, and we are required not to give it to the bank, but to a secure organization.
Right, and I'm not talking about the
No, not the
banking
bank,
info.
not the bank information.
I'm talking about the release of liability
Oh,
form,
oh, okay,
because you're collecting
Personal information.
personal
Name, birthday.
information.
okay.
Gender, address, name.
Similar to what we would do with all other public record persons that we haven't necessarily had to get, but we would hire the service that would come in and.
And we have a policy on how that is all handled,
Can
correct?
we consider scanning the paperwork, putting it all in digital format, and then shredding all the papers? I mean, have you thought about that?
Honestly, that can end up being worse.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter.
So, in today's modern age, it's actually the digital side is got a whole lot more regulation, a lot more concerns than having the paper side. At least we can keep this in a locked file cabinet and control key access basically, but, yes, I mean, that's kind of the biggest issue, and they're hitting cities now more than they ever have, so.
Not hitting anybody.
Thankfully, because we're small and we're limited in resources, we're old school,
Yeah.
which is kind of a good thing right now.
And
It is.
that is kind of a true statement, but if you collect it, you're
Responsible
responsible
for it.
to.
And we do have, and so you know, we've added additional insurance in the last 2 years because of that, because of the information that we're collecting.
So just so you're aware, right now, California has passed legislation that would severely hamper our collection of the data and our storing of the data. And there is a cascade of about 20 states sitting after California. They're going to start enacting similar legislation. So I just want to make sure that we are prepared if and when that comes, that we've thought about what we're doing. That was my reason for asking.
Okay. With that said, I'll entertain a motion for the rental agreement guidelines.
So moved.
Yeah.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Same along the lines of the membership agreement guidelines and applications.
So moved.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next item, discussion and consideration of skid loader and end loader attachments.
So as I put in my report, and actually Nick, I gave a good overview. You know, this is not uncommon. We start the year with the CIP and we decide to make changes. In this instance, it's Matt and Doug's fault, so, as opposed to the trailer that we were going to purchase.
I'm gonna back over you.
Now we have a lot more parking spaces and things like that to take into consideration. And so, not to steal any of Nick's thunder, but we've hired Michael, and is going to be our maintenance individual on our public works. So this will be kind of come our route, so the equipment, if we can get better equipment for him to get the job done faster, obviously it helps out the rest of the crew, as he will go help them when it is done with this, but that was kind of the basis. So we're not really changing dollar amounts per se, we're just giving up one CIP and then adding two pushers in this place.
Anything you feel you need to add?
Not, unless there's questions to be answered on this equipment.
This makes sense.
The guy we hired from DeWitt, that's now gonna be, I think this guy has used one of these at DeWitt, so that's kind of why we push for this model with, it's sectional, so we can put one end up on a curve and clean the curve line a little better. Just some benefits to having people in place that have been places and seen how some of this equipment works. So our research was mostly done in-house, and it was beneficial to have that kind of research, so.
That's pretty cool to watch.
Anybody have any questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion?
I would move approval of the purchase of these various things totaling $21,433.16.
I'll second.
No, 19,000.
19,000.
Oh,
So I would say not to exceed 20.
not to exceed $20,000.
Second.
What, okay, well, there's a question.
There's two bids.
Oh, is that what I'm, oh.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry, we're taking the second bid.
19.
Oh, fair enough, oh,
350.
gotcha, needed to, yep, okay.
Okay.
All right, so let's redo that. We're gonna, I'm gonna make a motion to approve the purchase of the Arctic pusher and the skid loader situation there for not to exceed $20,000.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Next item, discussion consideration of setting a public hearing date for the sale of city-owned property locally known as 217 First Street Northwest.
Anything you need to add?
Yeah. Wait till the public hearing.
So, just need to identify a date.
October 21st.
21st is the date that it's in there, and just so everyone is aware that you'll have to call me if you have any questions.
That's fine for this one.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the setting of the public hearing date on October 21st.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of setting a public hearing date for the final plat of Stonebrook 7th edition.
And luckily, Nick is well versed in this, so it can be the 21st as well.
Hear that, Nick? You know, you're gonna be sitting over here on the 21st.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. It's gonna be a quick meeting.
Is Stonebrook 7 further north?
It's at the townhome development on the north
On the
side.
north side, okay.
Yep. And I do expect them to actually start on the 8th edition, which is the extension of that in the spring.
Yeah.
And if you do ask, yes, we did issue building permits. They're called building permits at risk because all of the improvements are technically in. It's just the paperwork that needs to be done. So if they see people digging up there, they have permission to do so.
So I'll move the setting of the date for October 21st, 2019.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion item, is the job descriptions, just an FYI.
Yeah, not really a discussion item. Because these employees actually don't, so department heads can appeal their situations to you, but these employees cannot. We just approve these job descriptions, but by all means, please review them. If there's something that you have questions about, please do not hesitate to ask Matt and Sarah, but they kind of gives you a rough idea of the 5 levels. They're handed out tonight. 5 levels of different types of jobs that will be available in the facility, from kind of the entry-level position all the way up to those that are going to be teaching classes. So
And these have no benefits?
these are all part-time employees.
Okay.
So, has there been discussion about the volunteer positions and where the volunteer positions, if they're gonna be scaled and?
So the
I mean,
volunteers,
You know, obviously they're $0 and $0, but
right,
how that's gonna be defined at all?
well, I was gonna say, I don't know that we've defined how many hours a week that we're expecting them.
And
Probably won't know.
I understand that. I
Yeah.
just wondered if you.
It'll be based on the person that approaches us, but also we have the school district they're working with, the
Yeah.
internships that they're gonna
That's
provide.
what I was thinking.
We don't know how many or how many bodies they're gonna provide. We have had discussions on the individuals that might be able to capitalize on that and how that's gonna work, but we haven't finalized anything. So that's still work in progress.
Where you would see them likely fill in is probably at the baseline position, kind of that front desk staff.
Yeah, that's right.
And most likely Monday through Friday, 8 to 3:30, 2 to 3:30, somewhere in that range, is what we've seen in other places. But we don't have a baseline, like this is what we have to have for volunteer hours. I think it's more or less defining once we get open where we have those gaps, and then as we get kind of known users coming into the building, you know, approaching individuals and saying, hey, you know, since you're here every day, would you like to be a volunteer? And kind of the only cost, obviously, to the volunteers is if we decide to give them a shirt, something of that nature.
Anybody else have any questions? I think it makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item, reports. So item I had, and Chris already sent the email out, was the US 30 bypass bike ride is scheduled for October 20th. So if anybody is willing and able to partake, feel free. Otherwise, Chris, I'm sorry, any council committee reports? Anything to share?
Today, I attended that homelessness presentation in Cedar Rapids at the library, and it was very informative. Talked about reasons for homelessness, they're different between women and men, and that if people get help early on in the process, how much in tax and, savings can be taken advantage of in multiple ways. So it was really informative. Nicole from Southeast Lynn Community Center went as well.
I assume affordable housing was a big topic.
Yes, that as
Yep.
well. So,
Good. Anybody else have anything? Chris, other than the fact that you won't be here in the month of October, anything else to highlight?
No, I did speak at the Iowa Ideas Conference, and speaking of affordable housing, I did speak to an individual from Johnson and the county that might be able to come and speak to some programs that we might be able to offer here. So it was an interesting experience. A lot of pent-up frustration outside of Mount Vernon as far as decisions that are made in that corridor.
On housing?
There was an opportunity for question and answers, and there was a lot of standing up and making statements that occurred at that point, so it was interesting. I didn't expect that.
I assume that's a lot of sarcasm.
A little bit.
Does anybody else have anything to share? All right, seeing no further business, meeting stands adjourned.